It's an honor for me to welcome back a classmate who was very active, very intelligent, unlike me at John Marshall. So it's a pleasure to welcome back Captain Norman Earl Griggs. He retired from the United States Navy, graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1953, and then he later reported to submarine school in New London, Connecticut in June of '55. After duty aboard the diesel submarine Taru in Hawaii, he was selected for nuclear power training in 1958. He served in the commissioning crew of the USS Scorpion and commanding officer of the USS Nautilus from 67 to 70. Captain Griggs completed his naval career in 2 submarine-related jobs at the Pentagon in the offices of the Chief of Naval Operations and the Secretary of Defense, retiring in 1976. He was in the Navy for 23 years. He received a Master of Science in Operations Research from the Naval Postgraduate School, and after retirement, a law degree from George Washington University. He and his wife for 58 years, married 59 years, Mary Lou Griggs. They live in McLean, Virginia, where they have 2 children and 7 grandchildren, and some of both are here now. It's a real pleasure to welcome back Earl Griggs.
Thank you, Gordon, for that most generous introduction. And thank all of you for honoring me by being here today and allowing me to speak to you. Gordon, Dick Barrett, our outgoing 10-year alumni president, Jimmy Hines, I lost track of where he is, there he is, who is our newly elected and installed president, members of the board of directors, and the fabulous alumni band, unparalleled anywhere in the country, I'm sure. I thank you all for the hard work you do to make these memorial events possible and meaningful. We know that it doesn't just happen. My fellow John Marshall cadets, sponsors, alumni, families and friends, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, and especially my dear wife Mary Lou, John Marshall class of 1950, and a D Company sponsor who has approved my remarks. I am also proud and thankful that both of my daughters and a granddaughter and grandson are here to support me, and I am totally overwhelmed by the other friends and relatives who have come here. Overwhelmed. I want to name a few. Mary Lou's sister, Meredith, is married to Jack Towns, class of '49, C Company. Thank you for coming. My cousin, Bucky McKinney, whose class I don't have before me, and his wife, Virginia, who I grew up just a few doors from. And my first cousin, Joyce Miller, who's married to Melvin Miller, class of '48, battalion captain. And so many others. As many of you know, Veterans Day was originally called Armistice Day, to celebrate the end of World War I in 1918 and to honor those who had served in the war. It was celebrated annually and was made a federal holiday in 1938. After the Korean War in 1954, Congress changed the name to Veterans Day, honoring American veterans of all wars, living or dead. Personally, I like the definition of a veteran as someone who at one point in their life wrote a check payable to the United States of America for an amount up to and including my life. That is real honor, and there are way too many people today who don't get it. We are gathered today at this Cadet War Memorial Site, which we consider sacred ground, to remember and honor not just the 76 John Marshall cadets who served and died for our country in 4 wars, both world wars and the Korean and Vietnam wars, but we also remember and honor all of our veterans, living or dead, who have served in the armed forces of our nation. And I ask you to indulge me by adding to those we honor today all those who are now serving on active duty, which includes my grandson in the Navy and my grandson-in-law in the Marine Corps, and I'm sure many members of your families. Our reflections on Veterans Day are filled with solemn pride in the heroism of those who died in our country's service, and with gratitude for their victories. The inscription on this center plaque reads as follows: "To ensure that their sacrifice will not be forgotten, these plaques were established here by fellow alumni, sponsors, and friends in memory of those former members of the Corps of Cadets who gave their lives on behalf of duty, honor, and country." I'd like to share with you a little John Marshall Cadet history. John Marshall High School began in 1909, and the Corps started in 1915 with 240 cadets. The band was organized 3 years later in 1918. The Corps continued for 45 years in the original location at 9th and Marshall Streets, right downtown Richmond. And then for 11 more years at the new John Marshall High School location on Old Brook Road in Northside beginning in 1960. The Corps was disbanded in 1971 during the anti-military Vietnam War era. So it existed proudly for 56 years and had as part of as the main part of its organization some 8,000 cadets. For most of its life, the Corps consisted of a single regiment of 2 battalions and 6 rifle companies, plus the band. The Corps, and the band even more so, participated in innumerable parades and many other events, including Richmond's first Armistice Day parade, welcoming home soldiers from World War I. And there are also inaugural parades for Presidents Hoover, Truman, and Eisenhower. The annual the annual Winchester Apple Blossom Festivals and Richmond's Tobacco Bowls. And the band also performed at the 1939 World's Fair in New York. I think most John Marshall cadets will agree that of the things that we really needed to know, we learned more as cadets than in any classroom. For me, the discipline, character training, and military experience that I received as a John Marshall cadet was the best possible preparation for what followed. A year in the Cadet Corps at VPI, now of course Virginia Tech, 4 years as a midshipman at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, and a 23-year naval career, mostly in submarines. My 3 years as a cadet, and especially the rat indoctrination with hazing, which was tougher than Tech or the Naval Academy, that made my subsequent military career much easier and better. And I am proud to tell you that John Marshall cadets really did march better than any of the others. It was probably the competitive drills. I think we who had the great privilege of being one of those 8,000 cadets at John Marshall lived and served in the best of times. We patterned ourselves after West Point and VMI cadets with common uniforms, the same cadet prayer, and the motto of duty, honor, and country. These three hallowed words, duty, honor, and country, still remind and guide us to what we ought to be, what we can be, and with God's help, what we will be. The rest of my remarks are about our nation, America, which was the nation and the culture that nurtured and inspired the veterans we honor today. Just a brief overview of America's birth, growth, and current challenges. Here at John Marshall High School, if not before, we read the Declaration of Independence that our forefathers wrote in 1776, and we believed it. We do believe that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But most importantly, we believe that securing these God-given rights is the first and foremost duty of our government. We also believe that with Thomas Jefferson, that where the government fears the people, there is liberty. But where the people fear the government, there is tyranny. More important, the Bible tells us fearing God is the beginning of wisdom and the fountain of life. The essence of what the nation's founders were trying to do was leave people free to live their lives as they choose, as long as they give the same freedom to everyone else. For the first time in the history of the world, liberty and the pursuit of happiness were no longer to be a privilege of the few, but the unalienable right of all. No other country ever began its existence with a charter focused on limiting the power of government and maximizing the freedom of its citizens, not just collectively, but individually. Even after we set this example, no other country has followed it. Neither has any country modified its charter to become more like us. So from 1789 to the 1930s, the United States was the sole example of minimal government anywhere. The establishment and protection of individual rights, which is woven into the founding values of our nation, extended into our business and personal lives. Knowing that you could acquire things for yourself and for your family by your own hard work, and that those things would not be confiscated by anyone else, was a powerful stimulus to economic growth, which quickly propelled America to the pinnacle of economic power in the world. This capitalistic economic model is based on giving people incentives to work hard. When you have an entire society of people with a great work ethic and sense of personal responsibility, that society will take off like a rocket and quickly achieve a position of power and leadership. That was the United States of America. with that advantage, we became a magnet for many across the world who wanted to share in the opportunities afforded by American freedom. Our unique culture made for a unique people. Some of our characteristics, our openness, our passion to get ahead, balanced by strong egalitarianism, our neighborliness, self-reliance, and over-the-top patriotism, and especially our faith, these are virtually in our DNA. And yet, beginning in the 1930s, and especially in the last 50 years, these qualities have faded like once bright colors left too long in the strong sunlight. Increasing reliance on government has led to addiction and dependency. Many believe our country is headed down the wrong path, and we no longer see the promise for future generations that we once did. The government has simply become too big, encroaching on the private sector to control every aspect of our lives. Federal policies and regulations are being changed outside of the democratic process, and lawsuits are being used to force our people into submission. The world is in a crisis, facilitated by our leaders' naive worldview. With alarm, we have watched reduction of the American military and the United States' participation in the world, apparently expecting troublemaker nations of the world to do the same. Instead, the result has been chaos in the Islamic countries of the Middle East, Russia's drive to restore Soviet glory as a superpower, and the growing aggression of China. Most of us here today knew that U.S. withdrawal and disarmament would encourage greedy and rogue nations to seize the opportunity and fill the power vacuum. Our leaders have demonstrated inability or unwillingness to recognize or admit that the world still has evil nations, or at least evil leaders. It is being said with growing credibility that our friends no longer trust us and our enemies no longer fear us. Meanwhile, illustrating the irony in the vastness of our government, and according to the New York Times, just last week the U.S. Department of Education ordered an Illinois high school to allow a transgender boy to use the girls' bathrooms and locker rooms, or lose federal funding. Can you believe this? From a newspaper whose motto is, all the news that's fit to print. It would be funny if it weren't so sad. Obviously, we have a lot of work to do. If this offends you, I'm sorry for you. It is way past time to set aside insidious political correctness and replace it with the bold values and principles that founded our nation and propelled it to the pinnacle of the world faster than any other nation in history. We must preserve and extend the American experiment of self-government under the rule of law with the consent of the governed. Principles that are timeless because they are true. It's also high time that we stop apologizing and start leading, because the world is desperately in need of strong and ethical leadership. If that leader is not America, then who will it be, and where will they lead? We cannot give in to apathy and hopelessness, because as we especially know very well, freedom is not free. The United States and its allies must defend it to keep it. As they instilled into me at the Naval Academy, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And note well, the focus of our vigilance must include our own government, regardless of which political party is in power. We have learned the hard way that we cannot democratize the world or be its policeman, but we can and must lead, because no other nation can or will act justly or do it as well. Most Americans and most of the world's nations know, want, and expect America to lead. And they are confused and frightened that we are not. It is abundantly apparent that our founding fathers strongly believed in allowing faith to guide their lives. They gave us freedom of religion, not freedom from religion, which has nothing to do with imposing our beliefs on others. I think many, if not most of us, believe that in the end, truth will prevail. We know how the story ends. What's left is to believe, as we do, that with God's help, we can and will successfully overcome these challenges. We don't know all the answers, but we know and trust the one who does, to restore America to one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, in the land of the free and the home of the brave. That and nothing less will appropriately honor and justify the sacrifice of the veterans we honor here today. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Amen.